Hi, everyone. Welcome to our meditation live stream. It's great to have you with us. My name is Cortland Dahl. If we have not met or interacted, just thought I'd take a moment to introduce myself. I'm a scientist at the Center for Healthy Minds here in Madison at the University of Wisconsin. And I also do a lot of work with Healthy Minds Innovations, which is a nonprofit that is linked to the center. The mission of Healthy Minds Innovations is really to translate the research and the science of well-being into practical tools that we can all use in our everyday life. So a big part of what we do, both at the Center for Healthy Minds and Healthy Minds Innovations, is really focused on the cultivation of well-being, and specifically on a scientific model of well-being that we've developed that focuses on 4 dimensions of well-being that are trainable skills. So the shorthand we use for these is awareness, connection, insight, and purpose. So today we're going to do a short practice related to insight, and I'll say a little bit more about what insight means and how we can cultivate it. But I see a few of you are already joining in. Looks like we've got some people from Atlanta, from Munich. So if you want to just say hi in the chat, mention where you're from, and maybe a little bit about just how you're feeling today and how things are going for you. Feel free to put something in the chat. So as I said, the idea here is that we have these basic capacities in our own mind, things that our minds and our brains already do that we can strengthen through meditation and other forms of training our minds. So insight is one of the critical linchpins of well-being, and it's also, as I just mentioned, it's something you can get better at. It's something that you can train. So I want to give one very practical example of this kind of insight and how it can inform how we deal with all of the challenges we face in life. So life is never easy. I think just being human is pretty hard sometimes. We all face the challenges of getting sick, of facing loss, of changes in our relationships or changes in our jobs and all sorts of other things that can happen. So life can be really challenging, as we all know. But in particular, these days with the pandemic, we are faced with a level of uncertainty, a level of change and hardship that is quite unprecedented. So what can happen is that the situations that we face in everyday life can trigger a biological response that in sometimes can be life-saving and can be healthy and adaptive. But at other times, this biological response can actually get us into a lot of trouble. At the least, it can just create a lot of stress. And in the worst, if it continues, we can actually get locked into patterns that lead to chronic anxiety, even things like depression and other forms of mental illness. So what I'm talking about here is our body's threat response. We are biologically hardwired to essentially be really good at detecting threats. Now, 1,000 years ago in our ancient evolutionary history, this is what allowed us to survive. And it's still what allows us to survive when we find ourselves in situations where we might actually be facing a real physical threat. The problem is that our minds and bodies and our brains even are not very good at discerning an existential threat, like a real physical threat to our survival, from an emotional threat. So when we might be out in public these days and we suddenly find ourselves around other people, a few years ago, that wouldn't have been a big issue. But these days, that actually can mean that we're at risk for contracting COVID, right? So actually, that biological response that tells us to run the other way is actually a healthy thing. But we might have that same biological response, the same fight or flight response in our nervous system and in how our brain is reacting, even when we're sitting at home, or maybe we're having a difficult conversation. So our bodies and our minds and brains are responding to an emotional threat or some other form of hardship as though it's a matter of life and death. And the problem is we can't sustain that level of stress for a long period of time without having really adverse circumstances. The fight or flight response is meant to be an instantaneous thing that comes online very quick, that mobilizes quick, dramatic action so we can deal with whatever that immediate threat is. It's not meant to be something that just becomes a continuing response. So these days, you can just turn on the news or have conversations with people, and we are getting this flood of negative information that is triggering this response over and over and over again. And we're just not built to have that kind of ongoing physical stress. It's almost as though you can imagine if you were out in the woods and you see a wild animal and you run away. But just imagine if that happened every hour of every day. You just curled into a ball at a certain point and wouldn't be able to function. So it's completely normal, actually, that we get really overwhelmed by this flood of negative information. It's simply because our biology is telling us to react this way. So what does insight have to do with this? Well, insight is what allows us to get the space so we can start to see the response that's happening. And then we can discern for ourselves if our response is a helpful one and a healthy one, or if it's that old threat response, but it's not needed in the moment. And we can do things. We can actually take strategies to examine our thoughts and our emotions, to see what beliefs and expectations are at play in the moment. And that can loosen up this response so that it's there when we need it, but it's not endlessly getting tripped in everyday life. So let's do a little practice right now. That's one practical way that we can treat this as a skill, and we can actually practice it. We can get better at it. So if you're not already in a comfortable posture, you can go ahead and settle in. You want to find a physical posture that is both upright and relaxed at the same time. And you can close your eyes or leave them gently open. Leave that up to you. And simply notice how your body feels. And in particular, take a few slow, calming breaths. And as you do this, notice how the air feels as it moves in and out of your body. Let your body and mind settle a bit as you breathe in and out. Now take a moment to reflect briefly on your motivation for doing this practice. And see if you can link it to a meaningful motivation or an important core value you have. Something that really calls out the best in you and perhaps even speaks to the well-being of others and the world. So you might simply think to yourself, may this practice not only benefit me, but it might also bring more well-being into the world. So just take a moment to set an inspiring motivation for doing this meditation. And once you've found that motivation, you can again drop all the mental effort. Don't even need to focus or concentrate. Before we dive into the insight practice, let's just take a moment to drop all the doing and simply be. Just drop all the effort and just give yourself a moment to take a true rest. And now you can bring to mind a situation. You can think back over the last few days or the last week or two. See if you can think of situations in your life that are prompting some kind of habitual reaction. Perhaps times when this threat response gets triggered and you feel reactive. It could be a moment of anger, a moment of fear, or any other kind of reaction that really feels like it's not you in the driver's seat, but just old habits and this kind of biological response. Just take a moment to see if you can bring such a situation to mind. And as you do this, imagine or actually feel how that plays out in your own body and mind, or even how you feel in this moment. So a very important point here is that this is not about judgment. This is all driven by curiosity. So there's no need to think about what happened or played out as good or bad. It's not a matter of making a mistake. It's simply to get curious about what is actually going on. So again, just bring the situation to mind and bring some of the vivid details back into your memory and just imagine what that feels like, what thoughts are moving through your mind, how you might act. And again, not out of judgment, just bringing that to mind with a sense of curiosity. And when you feel ready, you can keep going with that if it's helpful. But if you want to switch gears a bit, imagine what it would look like to respond in the situation rather than react. So reactions are driven by habit. When we can respond, it means we can bring some intentionality, some conscientiousness, some sensitivity into the situation. So play that same situation out, but what would it look like to really respond rather than react in a moment like that? And again, no judgment here. This is not a matter of good or bad, just getting curious about how these different responses might look in the moment. And now let's hit pause for a few moments, drop the reflection, and notice what is going on in your body. Where do you feel the most sensations in your body right now? You can scan slowly through your body, and whether you're feeling something unpleasant like tension or tightness, or a sense of ease or relaxation, whatever you feel is perfectly fine. Just notice what's happening in your body right now. And similarly, notice what is happening in your mind. Do you have words or images that are playing out in your mind right now? Is your mind clear or dull, restless or calm? You don't need to change anything. It's all good. Just notice what's happening in your own mind for these next few moments. See if you can stay aware of what's happening in your mind. And now let's pick up the reflection again. This time, think about what is going to be happening in your life over the next few days, or even the next week or so, and see if you can find some moments that are likely to occur that might trip this threat response in your body and mind. So bring a situation to mind, just imagine what's likely to play out, and set a clear intention to bring some insight into that situation. Set a clear intention to notice this threat response. And with that noticing, to bring a wise response rather than a blind reaction. So just take a moment to think of a few situations and set that intention and imagine what that might actually be like to respond with insight and wisdom in a situation that you envision. Now you can get creative and think about anything else in your life that feels like it could use a little insight, a fresh perspective. And just again, think about this natural response that we all have to react to perceived threats. Just let your mind roam and think about situations or things that may have happened or might happen. Again, not the most difficult thing, but just things that could use a fresh perspective, and get creative in how a little insight into seeing this difference between the blind reaction and a wise response that we can bring into these situations. So you can, again, just get creative here and see what comes up in your mind as you reflect on this. How could you apply this insight into your daily life? And for the last few moments here, again, let's drop the reflection and return awareness to your body. And again, you don't even need to focus. You don't need to meditate in any effortful way. Allow your body and mind to completely let go and drop into a state of effortless presence. You don't need to control your experience in any way. Just rest your mind naturally. Now you can slowly open your eyes if they've been closed. You can move your hands a little bit, wiggle your toes. Again, noticing the sensations in your body. Look around your room a little bit. And if you like, you can share a comment about what came up for you in your practice, anything that you might have noticed. If you have any thoughts or questions you want to share, you can put that in the comments as well. Anything that you feel inspired to share. And I'll just share a few comments of my own here. So a few really, really important points about this practice. The one I cannot emphasize enough is the importance of letting curiosity propel you into this kind of inner exploration. We all have old habits. I think a lot of us tend to be really, really harsh with ourselves, sometimes harsh towards others. And we can notice that if it happens. If that is, you do have an old habit where your mind just kicks into that kind of critical mode, whether it's directed towards you or directed outward, that's fine. You can notice that. You can even get curious about that, right? So the key here, though, is that we're not trying to change anything that's happening, even that kind of critical, judgmental mind, but we're bringing a sense of curiosity to what we notice. We're bringing that sense of a willingness to look, a willingness to examine whatever's coming up without trying to kind of evaluate it as good or bad or right or wrong. So the judgmental mind can do its thing, and it will do its thing. That's fine. This is really driven by a whole different process, you could say, in our being. It's just that willingness to really look with a sense of openness. The second is that the questions are much more important than the answers. This is not about finding the solution or the right answer or some grand theory of the world. When we start doing this and you kind of make a new habit of being able to step back and examine what's going on, it's just this almost a habit of curiosity. So this helps in moments like this where we're looking at our threat response, seeing how we can respond rather than react. But it's the same skill that helps us in relationships, for example, just staying open to what other people are telling us. So these days in the US, for those of you that are here, there's just this incredible political division. It is so critical for the very fabric of our society to be able to listen to each other, to be able to stay open to each other. So this is the same skill that can help do that. It can help repair that sense of division. So yeah, I'm just looking at the comments here. And it's interesting. I see one is just all sorts of stuff comes up. I see that there's a comment here about noticing a friendship dynamic that has recently changed. David mentioned that there can be feelings of angst. And for those who have experienced trauma, this can actually be really, really challenging. It can be extremely transformative, but also really challenging. So both of these comments, I think, kind of point to another piece of this, which is the need not only for this sense of curiosity and kind of a non-judgmental way of viewing all of these experiences, but the importance of self-compassion within all of this. So what I've noticed in my own life is that this can be incredibly freeing and liberating. These kinds of practices, these insight practices, are the ones that really loosen up those rigidities in our mind, all the old emotional patterns that just seem so entrenched, like they're never going to change, or the old memories that have just been looping through our minds forever, or the baggage we carry with us about our relationships, especially probably about our family. These are the practices that loosen that up. But the process of doing that, the process of that loosening, is sometimes inspiring and rejuvenating, but at other times it can be really challenging. So it doesn't always feel good when we do this. The end result is incredibly positive, but the process can be quite difficult. It's like a difficult medical treatment in some ways. It's going to feel fantastic at times, and it might be really challenging at other times. So again, the point here is that self-compassion through all of this is really, really critical. Sometimes the best thing to do is to take a break. We don't always have to power through things in our meditation. It might be to pick up the phone and talk to a friend, or go outside and spend some time in nature and go for a walk. Sometimes that actually is the best and most healthy thing we can do for ourselves when a lot is coming up in a meditation practice. So you can see a few comments here in the app just for these last, or in the comment section here for these last few moments. If you found this helpful, Healthy Minds Innovations and the Center for Healthy Minds, we've developed a lot of resources that can help you along your personal journey. We have the Healthy Minds Program app, which has tons of practices and insights from the science of well-being. We've been offering a masterclass to the public, which you can find on the Healthy Minds Innovations website. So there's lots of opportunities if you want to take this deeper and take some further steps in your own journey. We would love to support you in that. And again, I want to thank you, all of you who joined me today. And for those of you who watch later, it's great to spend a few minutes meditating with you. So best of luck with your personal journey, and hopefully we'll see you for our next meditation. Take care.